What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful here, ahead of AEW New Japan Forbidden Door, June 26th in Chicago. You can watch it live on Bleacher Report pay-per-view and in select theaters. And we got a name you know. He isn't booked for the show right now, and for good reason. He's been sidelined for quite a while. But we got the cleaner, Kenny Omega here. Kenny, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Man,
And it is a shame
missed.
that I am not. Yeah, I'm pissed. I wish I could be in Chicago. I wish I could have something in line for the big show, and I do not. So I did what I could to reach out to make myself somewhat visible and or audible for this weekend. Otherwise, I would have felt like I wasn't needed at all.
And admittedly, it did surprise me when this opportunity came up because, I mean, you've been out of action for quite a while, and like the list of injuries that we hear that you were working through. I was talking to Adam Cole a few months ago, and he's like, man, it amazes me the stuff that he was able to accomplish, because we've heard about vertigo, we've heard about like shoulder and knee and sports hernia injuries and all these things.
Yeah.
Like, how were you feeling by the time things wrapped up for you back in November?
I think it could be as a wrestler, it could just be as a performer, as a competitor, but I think as time passes by and you start to bury things you try your best to ignore the things that poke and prod at you. You try to ignore the things that are nagging injuries. You try to ignore the things that don't seem as important as the task at hand. So when I knew that I had a title match, or if I knew that I had some kind of important match where I knew I could possibly elevate somebody, or even if it was just, I know that I've got a real fun segment coming up with the Elite, with the Bucks. Whatever it was that I was dealing with, I would kind of push into the subcortex of my brain and be like, okay, now what do we have left to work with? And how can I use what I've got left to do this without people knowing that there's an injury? Luckily, and I think you can really only accomplish this by having years in the business, or years in competitive sports or performance. You always find ways to deal with issues like that. And you always find ways to lean into other strengths you may have to cover up for weaknesses. That's just the name of the game. And it wasn't until I was kind of forced to sit and talk about all of these issues that I had, whether it be with, our trainers or doctors, when I had done a chiropractic video for a dude on YouTube, it kind of took me aback, and it shocked me to start talking about these things that I had never really talked about at all. And when I'd start to compile a list as to what is hurting, but not just hurting, but I mean, what is it that isn't going to heal on its own? The list was just too long. And I knew that as soon as I got into a position where I knew that the company was going to be okay, and I knew that I wasn't going to leave anybody hanging or devalue a belt or something, that I needed to take that time to finally get things straightened out.
And one of those things that particularly shocked me is we heard about you working with vertigo. I've battled that in the past, and like even defending like a high crotch takedown or anything like that, you lean over and the room starts to spin. With you, it's more than like a 3-minute, 4-minute sparring round. You're going out there having 30, 40-minute matches. And how did that affect you, and when did you first notice it?
So, I mean, I first noticed that it was an issue that had turned up in one of the G1 I called the semifinal matches. It was the Block B decision making match to decide who is going to go to the finals, and I had taken one of Okada's drop kicks. This sort of, I guess, all ties in a Forbidden Door in sort of a way. So I'd taken one of Okada's drop kicks from New Japan, who we know we're working with coming up this weekend. And it was just one of those strange, it happens once every million times. The way that he turns over on the drop kick and the way that I had fell put me right underneath his knee. So he kind of did like this back flipping knee drop onto my temple. And I guess it put something out. It put out my C1 in my neck. I had thought it was just more of like a traumatic blow, like blunt force trauma type thing. Because I mean, it's a big knee drop on my head.
Of course.
But what I didn't realize until the day after in the morning was that something was out and something was wrong. As soon as I tried to stand up, I fell over, like you think you're going to walk straight, but you're walking at an angle, and I fell into a dresser and knocked over a bunch of stuff that was on glass and things. It was rough. And I
That
had to
fear
sit
sets
down.
in too. That fear sets in. Like,
Yeah,
will
it
this
is.
ever stop?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was knowing that it hadn't been 24 hours, and knowing that, oh my goodness, like I set my alarm to wake up after wrestling in the evening, to wake up at 9 a.m. now, either 9 or 7, because we had to be there early, to go back to this arena for main event G1 finals match. And I can't stand. I can't keep my equilibrium. It was scary. So I thought, okay, I'm going to calm myself. I'm going to calm my breathing. I'm going to go back to bed. And hopefully when I wake up, this will all just be like a really terrible memory. And I went back to bed for like about a half hour or so, and I woke up and it was a little better. And I was able to figure out that what made it really bad was when I had to get up from a lying state, flat on the ground. So if I was laying flat, looking straight up, that is where it takes me a long time to restore and reset that equilibrium. If I was on my side, I was able to offset a lot of that dizziness that goes with the vertigo. So my recovery from going to being dizzy to being able to function would disappear in a matter of a second, rather than having 5 to 10 seconds of like, oh boy, like I feel like I did that bat gaming where you put your forehead in the bat and run around in a circle. I thought I did one of those types of guys. So I had just put it in my head, knowing what I was going to do in that match in the main event, that whatever I do, I have to avoid being on my back flat a lot, and try to be on my side, or at least reset to a side position as quickly as I could, regardless of what happened in the match. And I remember near the beginning, and I remember it like it was yesterday. There's a part in the match where I take kind of like a jumping neck breaker type thing, and I just stayed lying on my back too long. And for a second there, I was like, oh no, like I just did myself in. I totally forgot. And this is gonna get rough, because we've just started this match. We're about like 5-7 minutes in. But we were able to get back on track, and it worked out all right. But it was scary. And it had been a problem that if my C1 went back out, it would come back. And sometimes I would have moments where, I would have a good 8 months, 9 months, but then even just riding having a bad bus ride or having a bad plane ride might put it out. And it was just something that I always had to make sure that I had access to someone who knew how to fix it, to have them on hand at all times. Because the last thing I would want to do is feel that way in a ring, and to have the responsibility of my own safety and someone else's safety in my hands at that point. Definitely didn't want to do that.
And this, among several other injuries we've heard about, is what has you sidelined right now and out of Forbidden Door this upcoming Sunday. And obviously, the comparison that I've drawn, maybe not a perfect one, but it's a little bit like Rob Van Dam. He couldn't be at ECW One Night Stand, something that obviously he had a major part in even existing, but the card was still incredible for that show. It was still a fun show.
Of course.
And that's what I'm expecting this Sunday as well. But how do you feel about this? Because, I mean, that New Japan has been a huge part of your life.
It really has, yeah. I mean, it's probably arguably the most important phase of my career. And to me, I'm able to sit back and kind of watch it with a smile on my face, because this was sort of always the hopeful. This is always the hope. I don't want to say end game, but it was always a hopeful pit stop into what the mission statement of AEW always was. I mean, we always wanted just to make wrestling a friendly place for everyone. Um, Perhaps not all of us, but that was always one of the things that were most important to me. I wanted to see a world where we were working friendly with New Japan, and I was hoping that that was something that would happen from day one. And here we are. We're working with New Japan, we're working with DDT, we're working with Tokyo Joshi, we're working with AAA, we're working with Ring of Honor now that Tony has purchased Ring of Honor. But I mean, it's there. We're working with all of these entities and promotions who may not even want to work with each other, but yet we are creating sort of this forum for everyone to wrestle and work peacefully. And I think it's really cool. And even though I can't physically take part in it, I'm still happy, and I'm still extremely satisfied that we could get to this point, because this is always what we wanted to do with AEW as an idea for a company.
And as you came over to AEW, it felt like there was some bad blood there. Like there were some serious questions. Would this ever happen?
Right.
I wasn't there. I don't know if there was any bad blood on your side. I mean, you had been outspoken about how some of the foreign talent was reacted to over there even before, and that added some fuel to that fire in your last few months in New Japan. Then you come over, and there are these words that New Japan is upset about this. Did you think that this would realistically happen based on the reaction they gave you when you said that you were leaving?
I did, actually. I knew that any sort of bad blood or ill will that maybe the suits had towards me, I knew that wasn't an opinion that was shared by the locker room. And I knew eventually New Japan to get into a position to be as prominent as they were in the wrestling culture and in Japan, that was all because the wrestlers really kind of took control and made it and made New Japan the wrestling promotion that they wanted themselves to become. So I knew that once the wrestlers took control again, and once it was less of an issue of myself and the current management, that we could get to a point where we were discussing, Forbidden Door or whatever the other possible name could have been. So I was glad that even though I left under a cloud, that we were able to bring things back to wrestlers talking productively with other wrestlers that wanted to do something really cool and change the landscape of wrestling. And, of course, there has been a management shift since I had left. And they were very much in line with that same vision. So it doesn't, if anything, the most surprising thing was that it took so long. I thought it would take a year or two, and it took close to 3-4. No big deal. Here we are. All is well. So I can't say much more than that. I'm just happy we finally got there. The roadblocks and the complications are just that. They're just complications.
So based on that, and you believing that one day this forbidden door would be open, how has your mentality shifted over the last 3.5 years since you left there? Because obviously you were very excited to join AEW. That's something that much of the wrestling world was excited about. New Japan, obviously not as excited about it because they're losing their top guy. But I mean, I'm sure that them not being exactly over the moon about it for someone who had worked so hard for them wasn't necessarily the reception that you wanted either, but you kind of expected. How has your mentality towards them shifted, if at all?
So I suppose one thing that I wanted to clear the air on was that I was never, even though I had been very committed to starting this project with AEW and making sure that I was available for TV, pay-per-views and all that, the deal was never that I'm leaving and you'll never see me ever again. I had always wanted to do everything I could in my power to be a hand for New Japan. All of us had volunteered our time, and all of us had wanted to do what we could for the company in the best way during our infancy with AEW. and also during a period where New Japan was trying some pretty crazy things too. I mean, right before we left, they had already booked Madison Square Garden, and I wanted to make sure I was available for that, and I wanted to help out in whatever way possible. And it didn't work out that way because management had different ideas as to how to structure the card, and I think that there sort of became this false narrative that talent were at each other's throats when it was very much it was completely amicable between talent, and even from a booking standpoint, it was more just about the people who were upset in the business world. And luckily, like I'd said, there's been a complete shift and change of power with New Japan, and I do believe that the emphasis on the wrestling and what benefits professional wrestling the most is now in the forefront. So, but to go further into your question, it's been over 3 years. It's for me not to have done any sort of like pickup matches for New Japan. Like I didn't get to do any stops there like Jericho did, or Mox, or a guy like Wheeler Utah or anything like that. So for me to go from being their champion and to being one of their top guys to kind of giving my farewell speech, and now we're at a point where a lot of these guys that weren't in a prominent position are now in a prominent position, and there are a lot of new faces as well. It's really kind of cool, and it really, for somebody who has only seen just now a little bit of the interaction between our superstars and their superstars, I'm eager to see what kind of chemistry exists there. I mean, when I left, if I were a betting man, I would have put everything that I had owned in my name. So a couple of retro consoles and $5. I would have put that on, knowing that probably Jay White and Will Ospreay were going to be the go-to international talents that they would heavily push after leaving. And next to that, I knew that very soon down the line, the lightning in the bottle that they didn't know they had in Shingo Takagi, I knew was going to come into his own as well, and be an incredible force for New Japan, and an incredible talent that people were going to want to watch. So it's really neat now. It's nifty for me to kind of be on the sidelines and to see that, okay, in one of our highest marquee matches, we've got the guy that I lost the belt to in the main event, Tanahashi, going against Mox, who was a guy who's beaten me, and I guess I've beaten him as well. So a lot of history there. Jay White, is in one of the matches for one of their most prestigious belt now too, against a guy I'm very familiar with, Okada. And then there's Adam Cole and Hangman, the guy I lost the AEW belt to. There's just a lot of history there, and it's cool to see that when I had sort of said my farewells to New Japan, not knowing how things would go, that Jay White did step up, and he did become the guy that New Japan needed. He became sort of their box office superstar. He became the guy that you could base a pay-per-view off of. He became a great guy to put on posters. He became someone that when he speaks, you want to hear what he has to say, and you're compelled by what he has to say. And then in sort of a different kind of vein, you had a Will Ospreay who he can do anything. He's strong, he's fast, he's agile. He is a great representative for New Japan, for all of the dudes that are hitting the pavement and making those indie dates. He's kind of he is kind of their spokesperson to give everyone that current day 5-star match that that we all know and love, some of us, and different strokes for different folks. But I mean, Ospreay, he's doing great in his role. Not my thing so much. But Jay White, like I said, he's kind of become the star that they've needed. And I can't say you need one over another, but I do think they work quite well harmoniously. So with a guy like Will, who's just great at moves, and you know, he has a list of the about 20 very forgettable 5-star matches. I mean, come on, I'm going a little too hard on Will. Will is great. Will is great.
That's going to be a headline now. You're aware of this. You're fully aware that people are going to pick up on that. They're hanging on that, those words.
You could be right. You know what? I don't want to say anything bad about Will, but
you did.
No. Okay. Here's the thing. If we're being completely honest with each other, I do believe that with the current rating system and how things are viewed, I believe that Will has earned every last one of those 5-star performances that he has had. Now, do I think that if you go back into the works of some of the legends, I'm even going to throw my name in the hat. Even if you go back to when I was having 5-star matches and I was kind of that sort of guy, I just think that the matches from back then were a little more memorable. And as much as hard as Will is working, Will just isn't quite. Will is there. I'm digging myself into a hole here. Will is there, and Will is great, and I'm glad to see him in a marquee match against Orange Cassidy. I'm just saying that I think that New Japan made the right choice by going with Jay White. Jay White was the star of the two. Is all I'm saying.
But that's not to say. I mean, you did just good job, little bro. Him. I mean, you did.
Well, look. I think when you're in a position like Will, when you're someone who can do anything so easily, it's tough to become very satisfied with the cheers and jeers of a very small indie crowd. Those little pick-me-ups, those start to mean more to you than focusing on how do I reinvent myself to become a company guy and an investment for $1 million company, like what Jay White had to do. You know, Jay White wasn't a freak athlete like Will, so Jay White really had to go into the think tank and come up with something that was marketable. Will, just being Will, gets crowds of a few hundred people cheering for Will Ospreay, and he is satisfied with that, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
So you're telling me Jay White's not very athletic and Will Ospreay?
No. Jay, I'm saying that I think when Jay White went back to the drawing board and he's looking at a guy like Will who can do every single high flying move, who is who's younger, who probably has a more clean slate injury wise, Jay probably thought, I'm going to have to think outside the box, and I'm probably going to have to come up with a way for this company to want to invest millions of dollars into me, to market me in the way that I want to be marketed so I can be valuable to this company. But for Will, and guys like Will, where things come real easy, he just has to do all the moves that he knows, and he kind of gets sort of that
high regard.
He gets that sort of false sense of, I am at the very top and pinnacle of the wrestling world because I get these high ratings from this one guy. And it's a tough trap to fall into. And I remember that when I first got my first 5-star match, I thought, wow, like, did I really become one of these guys? But then, it's just, I grew up after about 5 or 6 of them. You know what I mean? And I just feel that Will, the first thing he does is he goes online and brags about his next 5-star match, which if it's 5 to 1 guy, it's maybe 3.5 to me. You know what I mean? But it doesn't matter. It's if you're proud of it, that's great. But I'm just now we've gone into a completely different topic. But I just feel that Jay White became the company man that New Japan needed. That's it. That's all. And I'm not. I don't want to say anything poor about the efforts of Will, because it's tough. It's tough to do what he does. He does it easily for him, but it's still backbreaking labor, and he's still putting in the work that would kill any other person. So for Will, doing an incredible job. I just think that when you go about, okay, here's a way to sum it up. Will is working harder than anyone, but Jay was the guy who worked smarter than everyone. That's sense. It. That's the best way I can sum it up.
I know you're on a time crunch, but there are a couple more topics that I want to get into. I asked Tony on a media call a couple months ago about the idea of trios titles, and he was very transparent. He said, I'd kind of like to wait until Kenny gets back. What did you think when you heard that? And I mean, I don't expect an answer, but do you have a timetable?
If I'm going to be honest, my timetable before all of this started, I wanted to be back for the show. Being back for the show is incredibly important to me, and I really, really, really want to mix it up with somebody from New Japan. And it sucks that I couldn't do it. And it's to the point where I want to be on this show, even if it's just to do commentary or I just want involvement. And but I'm not there yet. And so I don't want to give, I don't want to take a spot from anybody. I don't want to put a spotlight on myself when it's not going to lead to anything. Sure. So I definitely am very cool to sit and cheer on the sidelines for everyone, to go out there and kill it, have a great show. And in terms of timeline, like I put myself back on the road to help out with some of the some of the Owen Hart Cup matches, and I felt that it was too soon. It was too difficult for me to miss 3 or 4 days of rehab and to have to put myself into a position where I was flying again and being very hands-on with talent. And when I'm trying to agent something, or I'm trying to show something, when I'm moving around from point A to point B backstage, I'm moving quicker than I thought that I would, and I'm doing more than I thought that I would. And I'm not eating properly, and I'm not resting properly, and I felt that it really started to set me back. And I'm not saying that I would have been ready for Forbidden Door had I not done it, but when I started to recognize that it was a detriment to my recovery, I kept myself home, and I'm focusing more on what I can do remotely, and I'm kind of doing everything that I can for the game now to make sure that we can make release.
Speaking of, that's the last topic I wanted to get to, was the AEW video game, Fight Forever. We've heard a lot more news sort of emerge over the last few months over what we can expect from this game. And I know this is something that you've worked hard on. The people that I've finally got to talk to me in relation to that game said, well, we're obviously not happy that Kenny's hurt, but it couldn't have come at a more convenient time for the game because you were able to devote a lot more attention to it. How has that been going? What can you tell us about Fight Forever? Because people are very excited about it.
It's great if they're excited. That's wonderful. It makes me very happy. It was really challenging because I wasn't sure what I could do or what I would be able to do, what I would have, from a creative design standpoint. Do the way I communicate my ideas are they going to be understood? Is it going to be too off the wall? Are my ideas too broad? Are they too grandiose for the budget that we have? These are things I never knew going into this project. And now that we're sort of, it's now to the point where we've talked about what we can do and what we have time for, what we have budget for, what's doable. And now it's almost time for me to find something else within this project to do, because the creative process is almost complete, where we know how the matches will flow. We know, some of these systems. We know how, the action reaction type stuff. It's now in a process of kind of being tuned, and then finally tuned from there. Still a lot of stuff to implement, but our guys now at Ukes are working at a blistering pace. It's incredible the amount that they're doing within a 24-hour period now. It just seemed like out of nowhere, like a light switch went off and they went into hyper mode. They're working real fast right now. It's real cool to see some of the stuff that we were worried might get left on the cutting room floor, and it's all getting implemented. So it was a challenge to attempt to make a brand new wrestling game from the ground up during the COVID era. It was very challenging, but and it got to a point where it seemed bleak, like maybe we would never release this thing. But we kind of got past that, and with the go-getters at Ukes, and then with the guys on our side, and with Gata Pro, with us and a couple of his old contacts that have hopped on board to kind of help push us to the finish line. We hopefully can be on schedule to make sure that we get this game out by this year. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
I'm excited for it. I've heard a little bit more about it, and we're gonna keep digging for our scoops. But Kenny, I always love talking to you. I was able to talk to you a couple of years ago ahead of your RedCon launch, and I know that you've been sort of out of the public eye for a little while, so I appreciate you taking the time. Anytime you want to come back, please do. But Forbidden Door, June 26th, Chicago, live on Bleacher Report pay-per-view and in select theaters. Kenny, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I hope that everyone supports Forbidden Door. It's a real special show for, not just us here in AEW, but also for the folks over in New Japan. It's a pretty cool thing for them to trust us with. And we hope that wrestling fans, not only of AEW, but of the entire world, are able to watch and enjoy. And maybe there'll be a Forbidden Door 2, 3, 4, and other projects of the like in the future. This is always the type of stuff that we wanted to do in AEW. So it's great, 3 years down the line to finally get around to doing it.
Fightful will be on the scene. We got a post show as well. But Kenny Omega, thank you so much. Until next time, guys, we're out. Don't get taken to the cleaners by your ISP, unsecured Wi-Fi, or geo-blocked material. NordVPN.com/Fightful is here to help. You already get a great deal, an additional month free, and 30-day money-back guarantee no matter what you get. But now you have plans to choose from. Maybe you just want to try a VPN. Well, the standard is for you. Maybe you'd like to add a pass to that. Well, Plus has that. And maybe you want to add a locker on top of that. Complete is for you. And it works on all your devices. Phone, laptop, desktop, router, PC, TV, anything you got, it'll help you out. Change your virtual location with just one click. Gain access to some geo-blocked materials and that online threat protection. When you're traveling, you're on that unsecured Wi-Fi, it isn't always the safest. NordVPN.com/Fightful helps you, and it blocks annoying pop-up ads, malware, and online trackers. NordVPN.com/Fightful.